So what the Stoics let's get into what the Stoics actually do, say this more nuanced approach, right? So the way I would explain it, and this is a little bit of a simplification, but it's the easiest way I can think to explain what the Stoics actually say about emotion. The Stoics say there are three types of emotion: good, bad, and indifferent types of emotion, right? So we know the Stoics distinguish between the good, the bad, and the indifferent in general. And normally when people talk about emotions, they're focusing on what the Stoics say about bad emotions, like Pathos, which is what confuses people partly is the translation, because by a quirk of the Greek language, they use this word to mean emotion, and by that also the Greeks included what we would call desires. So they are meaning, their word pathos is both broader in some respects and narrower in other respects than our word emotion would be. So it doesn't map neatly onto our language of emotion. It's also the word that's the root of our word pathology. So it can mean both emotion and suffering or disease in Greek. And they sometimes use it broadly to refer to all emotion, colloquially, but sometimes they also use this word specifically to refer to unhealthy or irrational emotions, and that's what the Stoics are talking about. And sometimes even scholars, even very eminent scholars, have misread the Stoics as talking about emotion in general and the extirpation or the uprooting of all emotions, when in fact they're really talking about uprooting negative, irrational, excessive and unhealthy emotions as they themselves phrase it. And they make it clear, particularly Cicero makes it clear when he's commenting on the Stoics, that Cicero plays with the idea of translating this word into Latin as disease or suffering or perturbation rather than emotion, because he says that's what they mean in Greek. It's just a bit of a quirk of the language that it's difficult to translate or confusing. So they talk about these unhealthy emotions, and then they distinguish those from Eupatheia, or healthy or good emotions. So those would be rational, moderate, or not excessive, natural, healthy emotions that the wise man has. So the sage has these. And so they want to replace the unhealthy emotions with the healthy ones, right? Not just remove all emotion.
Can I ask one question here? Sorry, I just want to jump in. So would it be right to say then that pretty much all emotions can either be unhealthy and irrational or healthy and rational? Or not all emotions, but most emotions could be one or the other depending on how you approach them?
Well, that's actually what I was going to go into next, is the indifferent emotions. So there are three categories. And again, this is where the translation becomes difficult. Just as an aside, one of the areas where it's hardest to translate one language into another is when you're discussing emotion. So if you're talking about medium-sized dry goods, like a table, a chair, or whatever, usually translation's fairly easy from one language to another. But when you're talking about emotion, it becomes complicated because the terminology that the ancient Greeks used for emotion doesn't map directly onto the terminology that we necessarily use today. And so they also talk about what they call Propatheia, which is translated as proto-passions or precursors of emotion, or the initial movements of emotion. And Seneca gives us a bunch of examples of these, like blushing, shaking, sweating, trembling, and he even applies it to anger, sort of the initial kind of feeling that precedes anger, or of irritation or rage welling up. Now, the best way I can think of explaining this is that these are involuntary emotional responses. They are automatic. They're not up to us, as Epictetus said, and therefore, as the Stoics say themselves, the wise man accepts them as indifferent. So he doesn't view them as negative things. He doesn't struggle against them or try and suppress them. He doesn't try and encourage or cultivate them. He just views them in a detached manner, just as a natural physiological phenomenon. There's a really good anecdote in a Roman writer called Aulus Gellius that explains this beautifully. It's just a shame it's not in the main sort of canon of Stoic texts. But maybe I can tell you about that later. But there's a little story that he tells, an anecdote that perfectly sums up this key, crucial point in Stoic psychology. So everything falls into kind of healthy or unhealthy emotions, but then there's also these kind of emotions that, because they're not under our direct control, are just to be shrugged off as indifferent. And another way of explaining that, now I'm going into a slightly different topic, right? Another fundamental aspect of what the Stoics say about emotion that many people get confused by, in our culture we take for granted a Platonic theory of emotion. It's implicit in our whole way of talking about emotion, where we distinguish reason and the passions as two separate faculties. So when you're talking to people on the internet or psychologists, they often view emotion this way, right? But the Stoics said that's wrong. Like, they argued that reason and emotion are intertwined. They're really two different aspects of the same thing. And that when we have passions like anger, the Stoics said it's not just a feeling. Anger is also a cognitive attitude. So anger is an attitude that says, you've done something wrong, buddy. Like, you've done something really wrong. Like, and the Stoics said it's difficult to genuinely be angry with somebody without also having this attitude or belief that's a value judgment, which might be mistaken, right? And this was absolutely integral. Like, this was rediscovered in cognitive therapy. Now, the Propatheia, the involuntary emotions, the Stoics might say we share with animals. Like, they're kind of physiological. So Seneca says, look, if somebody comes up behind you and goes boo, like, you'll jump and you'll feel nervous, right? Your blood pressure might go up, your heart might start beating faster. But so are you anxious or afraid? Well, you have a kind of involuntary anxiety response, but there's a sense in which it's not actually fully blown fear, because you don't believe that you're in any danger. And as long as you continue to believe that you're not in danger, it will just go away again naturally. He compares it to someone poking you in the eye and you blinking automatically, right? But we tend to confuse this involuntary anxiety with the cognitive attitude of fear, where we actually believe that we're in danger. And so the two things tend to overlap, and the boundary gets kind of blurred between them. So the Stoics say it's the cognitive emotions. It's the ones where there's an underlying belief that they want to change. And they don't want to change them by suppressing them, but they want to change them by questioning whether the underlying belief is simply wrong, whether it's mistaken or faulty, right? So the example I gave you earlier is, if I was angry with you because I thought you'd insulted me behind my back, and then I discovered that was actually completely wrong, and I realized I just made a mistake, maybe I realized I'd mistaken you for somebody else, then my anger theoretically should dissipate naturally. I don't have a reason to be angry anymore. And maybe some of the feelings would continue, but the angry attitude can't, as long as I accept that it's not true. As long as I genuinely accept that's a mistake, I can't really have that belief that you've violated a rule and committed an offence anymore. I've changed that. And so the physiological sensations should go away as well. And so the Stoics are saying not that we should repress emotions, but we should challenge, question these underlying beliefs. And that's what would transform them into the healthy emotions. But these kind of feelings that come and go, they say they're neither here nor there. Like, we shouldn't be trying to repress or avoid them, because that would actually imply that they're bad things. We should be just shrugging them off with indifference, which is very... Then we get into the whole realm of modern cognitive therapy, because there are really two strands there. And very briefly, I'll just tease that. One is whole idea about beliefs, and that being the basis of everything we then do in cognitive therapy. And then the other strand is this whole idea about acceptance of certain emotions, and that being a fundamental strand of modern cognitive therapy as well. And maybe we can dig further into what the implications of that are. But that's basically a little lecture, if you like, about what the Stoics actually say about emotion.
Yeah.